Hill, number one, Peter, number two.
So, since there's no one here, I would question.
That is a question?
No, yeah, I'm going to give Steve something in case he needs to.
You know,
I think
stretch
that's
it.
reasonable. Are there cooperative efforts from the town and Board of Ed to save money?
We want to talk about the air quality, what do you call it, HVAC system?
HVAC systems,
Yeah.
maybe the. In case there's.
And this was submitted electronically.
Electronically,
Our
yes.
first question of the day. Importance of having reserve funds. Good evening. Welcome to our Windsor Budget Forum, our second one tonight. On behalf of the League of Women Voters and Windsor CT Votes, would like to welcome you. Tonight we have our town manager, Mr. Peter Souza, and our superintendent of schools, Dr. Terrell Hill. They'll be giving an overview of our budget, then we'll open it up to questions. You may ask your question from your seat. You may submit it in writing. And we're going to move right along and jump in. There's also some literature online, and there's also some in your seats if you have any questions. Without further ado, Dr. Hill, would you like to start us off today?
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to say welcome everyone, and thank you for giving us this time to hear us discuss our overviews of our respective portions of the town budget. For those of you again, I'm Dr. Terrell Hill, Superintendent of Schools. And so the budget that I presented to the school board and then subsequently to the town council, here there's a one-pager here that the audience should have in front of you, but I will share for those watching us on camera. I always start with how I go about preparing the budget and creating the budget. First and foremost, we think about what we actually have to pay. And so the 6 most important things right away are our employee contracts. So we have 6 bargaining units, and we have to ensure that we obviously honor those contracts. And so those increases are definite every single year. And then we have our other fixed costs that come along in terms of maintenance contracts, excuse me, and I obviously have to pay the non-bargaining unit employees as well. So looking at that, keeping in consideration as well, during these last 2 years, we have been in a pandemic, and I've been very sensitive to not trying to bring a budget forward that would cause any pain, as it were, to families in town. I have said at each of these meetings and during the budget season that I also live in town, and I don't want to bring any pain to my house. I will continue to say to people there is no superintendent discount. I have talked to people, I say that and it's comical, but I have spoken to people in town, and some people do believe we get different things. That is not in my contract at all. There's not one page, nor would I ask for anything like that. But town manager, Mr. Souza, did tell me I have a shorter amount of time to get my bill paid when it comes in. So I did tell my wife, who pays the bills, to make sure. She just looked at me, so I don't know what that means. But I can't give you that look on camera. But so knowing what we had to pay moving forward, that number came in at a much higher percentage than I would dare present to the school board. And so myself, along with my business manager, Ms. Danielle Batchelder, we immediately knew that we had to start making cuts. When I consider cuts to any budget, when I'm in my school role, I immediately look at things that are as far away from the student, the teaching and learning process as possible. That's my first area to look at. So where we cut initially was in our technology area. So a lot of our technology was increased during the onset of the pandemic, where we had to send students and staff home to work virtually. So one of the things that Windsor was in a good position with were the computers, so the laptops, the Chromebooks. So we were in a great position. We had that equipment, but we had to purchase various software for students and staff to use in order for us to operate in a virtual mode. Once we came back to school, that's something I looked at, that we don't necessarily need all of that software and all of the programs. Why our software costs so much, I shared this week, is that we as a school system, we have to buy licenses. We don't just get to buy a package, in Staples or some office store that we can at home as private citizens, but we have to purchase licenses for every single student and staff member, whether it's a district-wide program that we're implementing or in a particular school building. But we have to purchase licenses. So the software and the programs can become fairly expensive in a school district. But we did a lot of cutting. My technology department did not like that. No one wants their budget cut. But they had proposed basically $1 million increase, and we cut $750,000 from that proposal. So they took a big hit. Where we could, keep monies separate or pay for things away from the town, we did utilize ESSER funds, those funds that we received from the federal government, to pay for personnel. And I want to be clear, those personnel that are paid for by ESSER funds, they are on a clear list that I had Ms. Batchelder create so that no one forgets, let's say, because it's a 2-year grant, and this fall will begin the last year of the grant. So each person hired under that grant knows that they were hired for those 2 years. That's what their hiring letter said. I have stressed and made it clear that there's a separate sheet in terms of keeping track of personnel, those hired with the ESSER funds, so they know that their job is a 2-year job. Now, we have kept in mind that those people who are doing well for us, we look to see where there's either a retirement or someone leaves us, and if we can hire that person from the ESSER funds and move them over to our regular budget, then that's what we've been doing. And I'm hoping to do more of that during the course of the next year, because there are some positions that are really important to us, and they're doing a great job. And also a number of folks, I call it on-the-job auditioning, so to speak. I've been encouraging them to go get their teaching license, as they have been demonstrated that they have the acumen, the personality that we look for to work with our students. So it's been a good thing for us to be able to pay for these folks without really increasing our budget, but now getting a chance to see if we can get them to come on to the roles to replace those people who are leaving. We did have to cut one teacher, and that was based on class enrollment. So as much as I didn't want to touch anything connected to the teaching and learning process, the reality is we looked at class enrollment. In a high school, a typical teacher load should be anywhere from 80, 85 students to 100 students. That's typical. Obviously, there are some districts, particularly cities, that have much bigger enrollment for a teacher, but that's pretty typical for a high school teacher. So when I saw that this particular course for the year had 26 students, I felt we couldn't justify paying the teacher. So it's not a reflection of that person, but we couldn't justify paying the teacher to teach those courses for a total of 26 students for an entire year. It's not a reduced salary position, it's a full-time position, so that was a position that was cut. And we also cut 2 other positions in the district as well. We're not filling one. One was a teacher who left us for health reasons, so they're not coming back. And we determined that we could take that work and have it subsumed in other teachers' roles, so we didn't have to fill that slot. And then another one is going to be a cut again from the technology department. Another area where we thought we could save money, the town is very good at doing all the maintenance and the works around the schools and on the grounds, but we found that even with that being done, we still had to contract out over $250,000 each year, and it's not a number that we can say is set in stone for more contracted services to fill in, as it were. So talking to Ms. Batchelder, we came up with the plan that if we just hired 2 full-time maintenance folks for ourselves, it's cheaper to hire 2 full-time folks with their salary and benefits than it is to pay that $250,000 each year and then some, because costs are just going up. As I think many of you have seen with the pandemic, all kinds of costs have increased. A cost that continues to go up as well is in special education. So we've seen a significant increase there, and not so much because we have so many more students going out, although we have seen more students go out when they came back, or different students, should I say, for various needs, coming back from being away from their traditional school setting. But the facilities that give the services have increased their prices. I don't think it's right, none of the superintendents do, but they're not providing any different service, but they've increased their costs significantly, so we pay a lot more per student for them to go out. And that's a cost that, again, we can't control. We do our best to keep them in-house or keep them in the district as best we can, but there are times when we can't provide those services that are needed, and the student has to go out, so those are costs that we incur. I think I've covered the high-level overview at this time, and I look forward to your questions. So the final budget proposed was 2.85%, or $76 million to the town. So that's what we've offered up this year, and we believe it's a responsible budget, and we believe it's going to help us continue to do what we need to do for the students and the staff of Windsor without putting a burden or extra burden on the town.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hill. Peter?
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, Dr. Hill. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and Vote CT for hosting this last budget forum. Similar to Dr. Hill, when we approached the preparing the town side or general government side of the budget, we look at trying to preserve our existing services, try to examine where we have growing needs and perhaps unfunded mandates due to either state or federal laws, and as well as looking at areas where we may be able to enhance services to be able to meet those needs that we see that are growing. The town of Windsor is very fortunate. We have a very strong foundation to build upon. As you all know, we have a very diverse tax base with still room to grow. Our financial reserves are strong. We have a strong cash position, if you will. We have the highest credit rating that's available from the various credit rating agencies at a AAA rating. That allows us to be able to borrow money at a lower interest rate. And as the interest rates environment continues to be volatile and over the next 2 to 3 years, that credit rating will be able to allow us to at least be able to mitigate the interest cost to some degree when we borrow monies to reinvest in our capital assets. And we have well over $120 million worth of assets in town between Board of Education buildings, town buildings, our various equipment and fleet. So we do have to reinvest, just like we do at our own homes. We have to reinvest in our homes, and similar to that, the town does. As you know, we have great quality services and programs all the way from infant to serving our most frail seniors in town. We have had significant efforts over the last 10 years to reduce energy consumption in our buildings, and we've been able to save approximately 25%, or excuse me, reduce our energy consumption approximately 25% when you look across the Board of Education and general government. And largely that is due through installing high-efficiency heating and ventilation systems in our major buildings. We also have solar arrays that are on, I believe now we're up to 7 buildings. We've got several school buildings, and then we have 3 of our town facilities also have solar facilities. So when we look at the budget with some numbers, the town council has adopted a budget, and they reduced the town manager's proposed budget by $265,000, and they were able to preserve those services by using federal funds similar to the Board of Education. The town is receiving dollars from the federal government over the next several years, and so the town council took some of those federal dollars to continue to maintain the services in which they cut those dollars, the town tax dollars from. And the budget also includes continued efforts in the area of clean and sustainable energy. We're continuing to fund the town's annual contribution to our open space preservation efforts. It puts additional dollars for maintenance of public spaces in our facilities. There are a variety of areas where we are proposing to increase staffing to a certain degree. To be able to maintain our public spaces, this budget includes a full-time maintainer within our Public Works Department. And we did that by adding a little bit of money to the budget, but we essentially reallocated dollars that have been in the previous year's budget that was going to maintain the former Roger Walcott School in Wilson. That building has been transferred to the Capital Region Education Council, and so we were able to take approximately $55,000 and transfer those over to another portion of the Public Works Department so that we could have a full-time maintainer position to help us provide all the different services through Public Works. We are adding a police officer position, and that position would start in January. And as I've noted before in many different forms, it takes about 12 months in order to have a new police recruit go through academy, go through field training, and then to be ready to be solo, if you will, on patrol. And so we have a number of retirements that are expected to continue in the next 2 to 3 years. So by adding a full-time position within the police department, it gives us a little bit of head start on at least filling those anticipated vacancies a little bit sooner. We also are meeting some needs within our social service and human services area. We have seen a significant increase in requests for fuel assistance. And so currently we have a half-time caseworker, if you will, that provides assistance in that area. And so we've seen increased demand, and so we're looking to increase that part-time position to a full-time position. And then as in the senior center, we are adding a half-time position to allow for a full-time senior center programmer to come on board. And as we continue to come out of the pandemic over the last 2 years, the need to be able to provide a whole range of programs and new and additional programs for our seniors is very apparent. We also are aging as a community. We're seeing, and we want to make sure that we're providing services to both our young seniors as well as our more elderly residents, and so that's a great opportunity for us to add resources and programs to the community. We also have a number of retirements across some of our administrative positions, and so this budget includes creating a full-time position within our assessing department. Right now, it will take a half-time position, create a full-time position for that, because we anticipate retirements in that area of town government, and so we want to make sure that we're ready to be able to get someone on board, be able to take some of the institutional knowledge from those folks that will be retiring, to be able to impart that to our new staff members. So overall, the town, on the expenditure side, when you include Board of Education and the general government, the expenditure rate is 3.26% year over year. significantly lower than the rate of inflation, and we achieved that in some ways by doing cooperative purchasing. We band together with other towns across the state to increase our purchasing power. We use national cooperative buying opportunities to be able to reduce or at least mitigate the increases in expenses. And so on a tax rate basis, the town council used approximately $1.8 million of our cash reserves in order to achieve a 0% tax increase. So tax increase that would go along with this budget would be 33.27 mils, and that is the same mill rate or tax rate that is in place for this current year. And that was a very cognizant decision by the town council. They understand what the businesses and our residents have gone through the past 2 years, and we understand that with the inflationary conditions that are there, they wanted to make sure that the mill rate stayed the same at 33.27. I do need to note, though, we all have read in the newspapers how car values have increased across the country. It's not just here in Windsor or Connecticut, it's across the country. And so each year, motor vehicles get reassessed, if you will, using I still call it the Kelly Blue Book. It's another national company that does the values of all vehicles, and so we use a standardized value depending on your age and your type of vehicle. Those all went up. And so even though the tax rate for real estate and personal property is staying at 33.7, if the value of your car went up, you will see an increase in taxes depending upon that value of of your car. The state did pass a budget. This is new information that I haven't been able to share over the last 2 meetings, but they did adopt a budget which has a tax rate cap or mill rate cap for vehicles. And so that is at 32.46 mils, so slightly lower than our 33.27. So there'll be a little bit of mitigation when it comes to residential vehicles. Unfortunately, commercial vehicles were not included in that cap. I don't understand the complete logic why the state excluded commercial vehicles, but anything that is owned by for personal use falls underneath that cap. So with that, Steve, I think I'll stop. I could talk for hours about the budget, but I'd rather take questions from the folks here tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. So I do have a couple questions that were submitted electronically. I'm going to start with that. If there are any other questions, please think about those. I'll be asking momentarily. But our first question that I'd like to share: what is the importance of having reserve funds? And I think, Peter, that's for you, Dr. Hill. You may want to both jump on that at some point, please.
Well, Dr. Hill has a background in business as well, so he can speak it from his perspective.
Reserves in the school.
Right.
We don't have a bunch of extra money in the school system.
That's right.
Around,
right. So that's a great point. So the importance of having reserves really there's a wide number of reasons. Just like we do at our own home, it's appropriate to have a savings account, and that's a reserve is akin to a savings account, and it's for those unforeseen emergencies. So some of us were here back in 2011 when we had Storm Alfred, which came through and created that was that late fall snowstorm and created significant damage all across town. And so unlike other towns, the town of Windsor was able to we used about $1.5 million at that time of our reserves to do all of the cleanup of all the brush that was collected and brought to the curbside. Other towns were forced to borrow on a temporary basis funds to clean up their property. We were able to cash finance that. We did get some monies back from FEMA, but that's just one example that we didn't have to cut any part of our operations budget. We had that reserve in place. If an unexpected situation comes up. Years ago, we had the, due to, again, a heavy snowstorm in the winter, the roof at the high school auditorium was compromised, and so we were able to access those cash reserves right up in the beginning until we got all the settlements figured out with our insurance carriers. So that's for the unexpected. But when you look at if we look at the volatility of the state budget in years past, where the states had to make mid-year cuts, we were able to be, in state aid to the towns, we were able to preserve, in large part, our services during that fiscal year by drawing upon that savings account or reserves. We didn't have to lay anyone off, we didn't have to cut hours, we didn't have to reduce any programming. So it also helps in our credit rating. I mentioned earlier that our Aaa credit rating, and so the credit rating agencies look, right now their guidance is that the community should have at least 15% of their regular annual operating budget in reserves. And that is for just what I just said, unexpected impacts. If a major property owner leaves for some reason, then the town has those reserves to draw upon in order to maintain services, and from the credit rating perspective, to be able to pay our debt. We go just like we all have mortgages or home equity lines. That's what the town has. We have a mortgage in our form of a debt service for all the reinvestments and borrowing that we do. So those are some of the reasons to have a reserve fund. To build upon Dr. Hill's earlier comment, the Board of Education does not have a reserve fund. It's all under the control of the town council, and at times the town council has made appropriations to the Board of Education for capital projects out of those reserves, because any year-end monies that the Board of Education does not spend in any given year, those come back into the town-wide reserve, and so the town council historically has been open to be able to meet immediate needs or unforeseen project needs that the Board of Education has.
Great, thank you. Excellent. Questions before we move on from our vast audience? Any questions? Yes, sir. We have a microphone. We're gonna wait till that comes over so we can all hear you, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peter Lang. I'm a resident at 63 Hudson Lane. I had a question on the schedule of real estate reassessments. So you mentioned automobiles being adjusted, but when is the other shoe going to fall?
Thank you, sir, for the question. So, state of Connecticut, communities reassess or have a revaluation every 5 years by state law. Our next cycle will be in 2 years, and so try not to confuse my calendar years with fiscal years. We're entering fiscal year 23. And our next revaluation will impact the fiscal 25 budget year. And they do that the values are established in the fall of 24. So as we go through make sure my math is right there. So there'll be, so that's when it will occur. So 2 fiscal years from now. And so town council and staff are very much aware of that. We're trying to get see how clear our crystal ball is, particularly in terms of our office market. We have a fair amount of office, as you know, here in town, and as that whole world changes with hybrid work from home and from office, we do expect to see a contraction in the values related to our Class A office products. So that's something that we'll be looking closely in the next 18 months to try to forecast out where we'll be at that time. That's another potential reason for the use of the reserve funds at that time, to be prudent in how we use our reserve funds, because if there's a significant drop in that those valuations on the commercial side, it could swing, if you will, swing the tax burden onto our residential. Right now, we're, not to expound too much, I know you have other questions, but right now, we're very fortunate where approximately 50% of our grand list, our assessed value, is non-residential. Most communities of Windsor's nature have, or suburban communities, are more like 25 to 30% are non-residential. And so when you do a revaluation, there can be pretty big swings between commercial and residential at times.
Excellent, thank you. Did you have another question?
I did. This is a general question. On this budget, there's a line item for great pond improvement. And I think I understand the area, but
Yeah.
if you could just help me better understand what the $488,000
Yeah, great. So Great Pond Improvement District is a tax sharing arrangement that the town entered in approximately 2010 to promote and facilitate the redevelopment of the former combustion engineering campus at the west end of Day Hill Road. And so in essence, it is the property owners within that district pay their taxes in full to the town each year, and the town then dedicates 50%, one half of those taxes back to pay for the public infrastructure improvements, not the private improvements, but any of the public roads. There's public open space that will be in that, and walking trails, and so that $488,000 is one half of the dollars that those property owners pay to the town, and that all goes back to pay their debt service on the public improvements. And again, it was the ability to facilitate the redevelopment of that former industrial site. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Question?
Do you anticipate any monies from the state's surplus?
Not direct, the question was, does the town anticipate any monies from the state surplus? Not directly from the state surplus, but what the state's strong financial position has allowed them to, the state's budget that was just adopted, level funds our state aid. So we get state aid predominantly in the form of school aid for the schools, which does not go directly to the Board of Education. The majority of that comes to the town, and that basically helps to reduce and offset the overall tax burden. And so the educational cost sharing is level funded. The other grants that we receive is roughly around maybe $3.5 to $4 million outside of the school. Those are also level funded from year to year. And so in years past, when they haven't been as in such strong financial position, we have seen reductions in state aid, or we were anticipating reductions.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir. Yes.
The special ed budget line item is fairly significant. I was curious, how many students does that comprise?
I absolutely cannot tell you that number right now. I would have to find it out. But I can say this, as I kind of alluded to when I was speaking. You see a big number, you would think it'd be this very large number of students, but it's not. In terms of the students who are being outplaced, it's not a very large number. But the cost per student is pretty significant. And roughly, you can put a $100,000 tag on each one of those students.
All right, thank you. I do have one question, again, submitted electronically. Are there any cooperative efforts between the town and the Board of Education to save money?
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So Peter and I spoke. Wow, it was actually over a year ago, right? So over a year ago we spoke, and we had I got COVID in January, and 9 other people in central office got COVID. I was like, how do we all get COVID at the same time? But we realized that, we could definitely use an upgrade to some of the HVAC system at LPW on the board side. And so looking at the ESSER funds that were coming in and what we had, Peter and I talked, and I was like, we can definitely contribute to the town to help get this done sooner, right? Because we know there are so many other projects going on, and everybody wants everything fixed. I have learned that. That has been my lesson that I didn't know in taking the job. Like, everyone wants everything fixed and replaced immediately. But there is definitely a list, and certain things take precedence. You may have planned for this, but then I learned from Peter that this is definitely more important, right? If you have roofs caving or HVAC systems, particularly during this pandemic, those things are more important. And we had the funds, and because Windsor is in a pretty good place, it's a town that's well taken care of. I've said that for years. It's one of the big reasons why I actually chose to move my family here from Massachusetts. It's a town that fiscally is responsible and it's well taken care of. So I said, hey, we could contribute if it, to help move things along, and so that we've done that. So we've taken some of our ESSER funds and given them to the town so that we can get the HVAC systems upgraded on the board side.
So I have to ask, though, has anyone else caught COVID since the upgraded systems have been put in place?
In central office, nothing to that magnitude.
Okay.
So we've actually had some repeat people, but I'll kind of throw out there, folks are going, COVID is not going to go away.
Right.
I'm sorry, folks on camera, it's not going away. It is going to be another virus that's out there that we will contend with yearly, like the flu. I said, it's not talking about symptoms or impact, but it's just something that we'll continue to deal with. So the folks who have gone out as a result of COVID by no means have felt the same amount of pain that we all felt in January of 21.
Website. We call it our